if you are in the Caribbean or the Americas. Good afternoon if you're in Europe and the Middle East. And good evening if you're in the Asia Pacific region. And welcome, very warm welcome to today's Crossing Borders broadcast, the IMC streaming service, which we created nearly 2.5 months ago to bring the investment migration community together and stay connected and informed of developments as and when they happen during this period of SARS-CoV-2. I know, of course, that many of you are now coming out of respective lockdown, and there seems to be some movement in regards to a little bit more face-to-face meeting. Nonetheless, the infamous travel corridors are still being discussed between various governments. The European Union has still, for the most part, failed in bringing a coherent solution to opening up the freedom of movement within the EU. But I think we remain hopeful that in the next 4 to 8 weeks, airlines will be really operational and will be able to travel a little bit further than we are at the moment. If you haven't seen one of our broadcasts, then please go to our YouTube channel. There you'll find a complete catalogue and library of all the previous broadcasts that we've done. Those are freely available, and once you're there, click to subscribe, and then you'll get updates on anything new that comes along. Remember, of course, that you can ask questions during today's session. We have 2 great speakers with us. We'll also have a little bit of polling in the widget, which is available on the right hand of your screen. You will be able to see that there are some handouts at the bottom. There's something about IMC education and training. There's a little bit about the Investment Migration Council. And importantly, of course, there's an important presentation on relocating to the Cayman Islands. So I'm going to share my screen. Let's see if that can work. I should be able to share my screen with you guys. Yeah, let me get my things up and running. Here we go. And there's an audience view there, and we can see everything. All right, so we're going to kick off with a little bit of a poll. It's always interesting to know where everybody is from. So we'll give you, as usual, a few seconds. Please click on one of the 5 options available. You've got Asia Pacific, Middle East, Europe and Africa, Caribbean, or the Americas. So normally we stop at about 80%. We're at 75%. Still a couple more coming through. All right, we're at 83%. There we go, 85%. So I'm going to close that off now and share the results with you and our panelists as well. So overwhelmingly, 26% from Asia Pacific, followed by the, oh, I beg your pardon, 47% from Europe and Africa, 26% from Asia Pacific, 16% from the Caribbean, and 11% from the Americas. So I think that's always interesting, and it's good for us to know, it's good for the viewers to know, and good for our panelists. Finally, at the end of today's session, there'll be a short video about IMC education and training, the certification in investment migration, which has become incredibly popular, particularly in the last 5 months. We launched that in June of last year. So about today's session, yes, we are discussing the Cayman Islands, the beautiful British Overseas Territory, which is located just 1 hour's flight from sunny Miami in the Caribbean. It offers one of the highest GDPs and a really great standard of living in the world, and one of the lowest population densities in the planet. Of course, it's a tropical island. It has lots of modern infrastructure. It's got good stability, good security, excellent healthcare, and a sound economy, which is free of any government debts. What you may not know is that the Cayman Islands does have various residency by investment schemes. I think they started about 1.2 million in real estate, and have a 30-day per annum residency requirement. So there are lots and lots of benefits. I am not the expert. What I do know about the Cayman is that there's a beautiful turtle center, and it's very famous for its Tortuga rum cake. But I've got two speakers with me today. I'd like to introduce those straight away, both based in the Cayman Islands. And I'm happy to welcome Sue Nickason, who's the Vice President of Marketing and Sales for Dart Real Estate, based in the Cayman Islands. And Sue has a portfolio that includes international business development, marketing of real estate, leasing in the community of Camana Bay. She's operating the Provenance properties and also the official Christie's international real estate affiliate for the Cayman Islands. Sue is Canadian and moved to the Caribbean over 10 years ago. So welcome, Stu. Unfortunately, we're having a slight technical problem, but Sue is with us. You're there, Sue, right?
I am, and hello everyone, and thank you very much, Bruno, for your kind introduction, and I look forward to introducing everyone to the Cayman Islands today.
And then with her is Daniel Altneu, who's a member of the IMC. He's a senior associate with Bedell Cristin in the Cayman Islands, which was formerly Solomon Harris. Daniel's firm offers, of course, a full private client service which covers every aspect of immigration, residency, trusts, wealth management, wealth structuring, estate planning, probate, and family law. So very good afternoon, or good morning to you, Daniel.
Good morning, Bruno, and good afternoon, good morning, everyone. Thanks very much for joining us.
Perfect. Thanks. All right, just short note for our audience today. As ever, if you do have any questions for our panelists on the Cayman Islands, then please use the widget in the GoToWebinar window on the right hand of your screen, and we will try and get to those as and when we can. All right, I want to first of all come to you both, and tell us a little bit about the Cayman Islands. Why people would want to move to the Cayman Islands. What is the story of the Cayman Islands, please? Perhaps Daniel, you can start.
Thanks, Bruno. Yeah, well, by way of background, myself, I've been here about 8 years now, originally from London, and I can certainly attest to the fact it's a wonderful place to live, work, and raise a family. I'll run through some of the highlights about Cayman, and Sue will obviously add to these as well. But for those of you who aren't familiar with the jurisdiction, in addition to our preeminence as an international financial centre and very high concentration of financial industry professionals, we boast one of the highest GDPs and standards of living in the world generally. And due to our traditional values of community and privacy, the fact that it's a safe and secure place to live with one of the lowest crime rates in the Caribbean, it is a permanent home to a number of high net worth and ultra high net worth individuals who are attracted by its natural beauty, well-developed infrastructure, stable government, strong rule of law, elite health services and education, and the fact that it's directly accessible from not only London, but over 20 major cities in the US and Canada, a figure which is always rising.
Fantastic, thank you. Sue, from your perspective, you're a Canadian. You've been in the Caribbean, and is it specifically in the Cayman Islands you've been for the last decade? Is that right?
Thank you, Bruno. And yes, I am from Canada. Prior, though, to moving to Cayman, I actually lived first in Panama and then the Turks and Caicos. So this is the fourth country that I have now lived in. And as Daniel noted, many wonderful reasons to live here. And I also am a mom, so I can attest to the benefits of raising a family here. But certainly from my cold origins in Canada, I can tell you that the weather is definitely something that attracts people here. You know, today I'm looking out my window and it's sunny skies. I think it's about 26 degrees Celsius, a nice trade wind blowing. But in addition to escaping cold winters in Canada, the other thing I escaped was tax. So as a Canadian, I have now gone non-resident, and as a result, I no longer pay corporate or income or property or sales tax here. In addition, there's also no inheritance and no capital gains taxes. So that's certainly something that appeals to those who come from high tax jurisdictions. And, you know, in this era when protecting health and protecting wealth is perhaps more important than ever before, the appeal of a tax neutral jurisdiction such as Cayman is certainly growing. I think the other thing that really attracts people to live here is what we refer to locally as the Cayman kind culture. So I came from the east coast of New Brunswick, or the east coast of Canada, in a province called New Brunswick, which was always, you know, very neighborly, very community focused. And I think sometimes that message about Cayman is lost. You know, we focus so much on how sophisticated it is here, the modern infrastructure, the tax neutrality, and the fact it is indeed a premier location for affluent individuals in which to live. But what is often overlooked is underneath that surface of sophistication is a genuine and very solid community culture of cooperation and of neighborliness. And that really is the other reason that I continue to choose to live here.
Yeah, so some great reasons there. And of course, I can see also that Cayman has terrific flight connectivity to the rest of the world. I'm told some 5,000 international flights to 20 major cities across the world, US and Canada included. So lots of accessibility, and it's done pretty well out of this COVID-19, hasn't it? Not many cases been reported, like many of the islands. But still, I would like to know, and I think our viewers would also like to know, is that on the basis that we know that not many residency by investments applicants choose to live in a jurisdiction full time. Some do, but not all. What, in your perspective, in your 10-year experience in Cayman, are the key differentiating aspects about Cayman, which compares to other Caribbean countries? You mentioned Panama, which we know has a residency, Turks and Caicos, but maybe some of the other Caribbean islands as well. So what are the key differentiating aspects about Cayman, please?
Thank you, Bruno. And I'll just preface what I'm about to share by saying, prior to joining Dart Real Estate approximately 3 years ago, I worked across the Caribbean in the resort residential consultancy sphere. So I speak to it both from the experience of living here, but also from having worked in other Caribbean communities. I would also like to say that every Caribbean nation has its strengths, and by no means do we ever try to suggest or want to infer that Cayman is better. Simply that there are distinguishing characteristics that lend themselves well to the unique value proposition of Cayman. But if I could summarize that, I would say there really are 5 key differentiators. The first one is that it is just so easy to do business here. And it's easy to do business if you're here to invest, or even if you just choose to live here and are accessing professional services. Cayman was ranked as the easiest place in the world to do business by the Global Complexity Index in 2019. And it really is a reflection of the very top tier professional services community that we have here. So, you know, whether you're dealing with the government or professionals such as Daniel in the legal profession, the private banking network here, you know, the big four accountancies that we're very fortunate to have located on Cayman, everything is just very efficient and easy here. The second thing is, I think you noted at the top of the call, is low density. So out of 235 nations, we rank 205 in terms of low density on the globe. And that speaks volumes, you know, to the exceptional recreational and lifestyle community that we have here. And obviously during COVID right now, low density is very important to people. And that would be something else that differentiates us from other Caribbean countries that perhaps are more developed or might not have the same infrastructure in terms of providing optimum traffic conditions, if you will. The third is proximity to the US. So, you know, we've talked about the fact there's excellent airlift to Cayman. And the other quick thing though is just, it's very fast to get to Miami. You know, we have 6 flights daily when the airport is open, either going to Miami or Fort Lauderdale. And it's very easy to, you know, take that morning flight out at 6 a.m. and come back on the 9:25 p.m. evening flight. And, you know, it makes it possible to go to Miami for a day to shop or to connect to other international flights, spend a weekend at a concert, and we see our community do that often. The fourth, again, as we've noted, is infrastructure. Cayman definitely is a regional leader when it comes to healthcare. We have 4.6 doctors for every 1,000 residents here. So our healthcare ratios are not only the top in the Caribbean, but indeed in the world. We have excellent education facilities here offering both British and American curriculums. Our children go on to matriculate to top schools in the US and Canada and the UK. And our utilities and telecom providers are first rate. You know, it's very rare that you would see a brownout, for instance, with the power grid was down. And certainly during COVID, with all of us working from home, and again, the majority of our financial services working from home, we've been blessed truly with great business continuity due to our reliable telecom. And the last is the lifestyle. We've talked about that a lot. I guess 2 key things that differentiate us. One is we are the culinary capital of the Caribbean. We have over 250 restaurants, and very excited that they are all opening up again this week. And the second thing is we're one of the top dive locations in the world. So for those who are marine enthusiasts, you will definitely pick the right place if you choose to visit Cayman.
Thank you. I just want to stick a little bit on, you know, the tourism side, the economy side with you, Sue. We know that the Caribbean clearly is, you know, very attractive to tourism. It's grown tremendously in the last 20 years as, you know, the cost of air travel has come down significantly. And, you know, we know that the Caribbean is going to, you know, struggle with, you know, no flights being available and tourism being such an important part of the economy. Has Cayman experienced the same issues, and what are the plans for an economic recovery on your beautiful island?
Yeah, so certainly, and unfortunately, we have not been immune to the impact of COVID-19 pandemic on our tourism industry. Having said that, we have not been impacted perhaps as severely as our Caribbean neighbors, for the reason that approximately 80% of Cayman's GDP is driven by the financial services community here. So again, certainly not in any way to downplay or suggest that our tourism industry has not been severely impacted here, but fortunately for an economy at large, we are much more diversified perhaps than other parts of the Caribbean. In terms of recovery, I work, as you shared at the top of the call, with a large development company called Dart Real Estate. And part of our portfolio includes 4 hotels on Grand Cayman, which is where both Daniel and I are located, and 2 other properties on our sister islands of Little Cayman and Cayman Brac. And our company made a commitment from the outset to keep all of our hotel employees on 100% pay for the first 3 months of this downturn. And that certainly helped mitigate some of the impact that it had on the local economy. I'm also, just as a quick side note, happy to announce that our hotels are looking to open this summer for staycations for our island residents, and sounds like we're going to be sold out very quickly. But the key things that the government is doing here right now really has been tremendous. The first thing is there's an R3 foundation that's been set up to help with recovery, not only for the current situation, but also just any future natural disasters or significant impacts to the economy in Cayman. And it really has been a shining example of public-private partnership. Aside from the R3 Foundation, we've had just an overwhelming level of support from the private sector. I think pretty much every professional firm and charity on the island has been contributing dollars, has been contributing people time, and has been actively involved in working with government to make sure we not only come out of this economic downturn as quickly as possible, but that we emerge Cayman strong. So the banks continue to lend money. Government continues to convey real estate and process residency applications, which I know Daniel will be speaking to in a moment. So all of that to say we are on a good footing. I'll end by sharing, we went into this downturn with an A3 credit rating from Moody's and also a very robust government surplus, approximately $500 million going into this downturn. So I think when you look at the sound footing government was on, you look at the investment, again, that companies like ours and the other projects on island are making, that would position Cayman very well and probably one of the leading Caribbean nations coming out of this downturn.
Yeah. All right, thanks. I want to come to Daniel a little bit about the residency programs, but I'd also like to come back to you, Sue, and talk about property prices for luxury homes, for condos, what the cost of living is. But hold that thought for the time being. And Daniel, I want to come to you now because I want to hear a little bit about, and the viewers, and we've already had a question in about, there's a bit of confusion, it seems, on the residency options that are available for the Cayman Islands. And this is a question that's come from 2 people indirectly, one from Asia and one from Africa. So can you just perhaps briefly talk us through the various options available? And of course, for our viewers, there is information to download. And if you want to reach out to Daniel or Sue, then you can get in touch with them through their LinkedIn or through the IMC, and we will, pass on the question. So Daniel, what are these residency options for high net worth individuals, for families, family businesses, and businesses as a whole, please?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll come on to those. There's 4 different options, but I just wanted to add to what Sue was saying, which is that during the pandemic and the lockdown, we've been very fortunate that the government's still been processing pending applications, and that we've been able to submit new applications electronically. So we have top quality civil service and professional service providers, and we've been able to transition quickly to a remote working environment. So that's been essential for our clients who, as you all know, it takes several months to put these applications together. So, being able to still process them and still submit them electronically, and to really have no break in that service has been phenomenal. And in terms of the 4 different options for residency, I can go through each of those. There's really 2. The first 2 options that I'll discuss are in terms of a real estate investment. So 2 of the programs require an investment in real estate, and I'll talk about the first one. Is the ultimate option, which is a certificate of permanent residence for persons of independent means. So this is a lifetime grant to reside in Cayman. It requires a minimum investment of 2 million Cayman Islands dollars, so roughly 2.4 million US. The investment must be in developed residential or commercial real estate. And in recent years, this has proven to be the most popular option, not only because there is a right for the holder and spouse to work in the islands, but mainly because this is the one that leads to citizenship, should the holder wish to progress down that route. So whilst on the face of it, our programs have very low residence requirements, this one in particular only requires that an applicant to be physically resident in the island for 1 day each year. Most of my clients who've obtained these certificates are obtaining them with a view to basing themselves here and to progressing to citizenship, because both they and their entire families can eventually qualify for both Cayman Islands and British citizenship. So how it works is that after holding this certificate for 5 years, upon satisfying certain residence requirements, they're able to submit their application for naturalization as British Overseas Territory citizens. That approval process takes a couple of months, and immediately thereafter, they're eligible to submit their application for a Cayman Islands passport, known as a British Overseas Territories passport. Again, it's a very straightforward process, takes about six weeks, and immediately upon receiving that passport, they're able to register as a British citizen and obtain the full British passport and all the rights and privileges that entails. So typically I say to clients, it's 5.5 years to a Cayman Islands passport and 6 years to a British passport. There's no obligation to surrender any existing citizenships at any stage during that process. And so these additional citizenships can be appealing to a variety of clients, for example, those from countries with what are deemed to be weak passports, as well as those who have to apply for visas everywhere they go, for example, South Africans, UK applicants with indefinite leave to remain or non-dom status. It provides an alternative path to British citizenship for them. And also applicants who are able to rely on a slightly stronger but still relatively weak passport in the interim. So, for example, lots of clients of mine have originated from a very weak jurisdiction. They've acquired a passport in the interim, often from another Caribbean island, but then look to ultimately acquire the British passport and sort of discard those previous ones and any corresponding financial requirements. The second option is also a real estate investment option, but it's at a lower level. So it's only at 1 million Cayman Islands dollars, roughly 1.2 million US. But unlike the permanent residence option, this doesn't give anyone the right to progress to citizenship nor any ability to work. And so it was previously termed, when I first arrived here, it was previously termed Residency Certificate for Retirees. It was mostly popular with retirees who wanted to purchase a condo on the beach, live out their days in Cayman, and enjoy our idyllic lifestyle. But unlike the first option, this requires you to have a source of annual income at a specific level, which is just under 150,000 US dollars a year from external sources. If that's not possible, there is another option to deposit the sum of $500,000 with a locally licensed institution. I should add that sort of one other way which government has been very flexible and accommodating is that I've successfully submitted applications for naturalization and passports where applicants and families often start on one of these 25-year certificates, which typically don't lead anywhere. But oftentimes, capital appreciation of their properties has pushed them into the higher investment category, the high permanent residence category. And so what that's enabled them to do is to upgrade their certificate. And as soon as they hit that 5-year residence mark, regardless of how long they've spent on the previous certificate, they're immediately able to progress on the citizenship route. So government's not suggesting that their time clock only commences once they've upgraded that certificate. And the third option, so now we move away from the options for personal real estate investment. And this is an option for businesses and family offices, and was developed to encourage them to come to and thrive in the islands by providing their key players with an easier path to residency. So this is a bit more complicated, but there's two subcategories within this option. It's also valid for 25 years, it's renewable, it entitles the holder and any dependents to reside in the islands and to work in the business or businesses in which either they've invested or in which they're employed in a senior management capacity. So I'll touch on the requirements for either, and then give you an idea of the types of clients that I've assisted with this option. But certainly a lot depends on the proposed size of the business. This is because the first category requires an applicant to own a minimum of 10% of the shares of the business, and to purchase or lease commercial real estate, and to employ at least 4 full-time workers who themselves are resident in the islands. So unless you're looking to set up a large-scale business, really the more popular option is the second one, which doesn't have any of those associated requirements, and simply requires the holder to be employed in what's called a senior management capacity, which means a work permit that attracts an annual fee of approximately $25,000 within an approved category of business. So for new ventures, generally what I'll see is an applicant first incorporates an exempted company, which is a company that mainly carries on business outside of the islands, relatively cheap, to a couple of $1,000s and a few $1,000s on an annual basis, sets themselves up in that company as a sole shareholder and director, and then seeks permission through this application to employ themselves in that company. So it's a popular route with investment managers, financial traders, those sorts of people who wish to transfer their business to Cayman, but are often happy to work from home. I'm also seeing this option used quite a lot with family offices, albeit generally they also use a turnkey office solution. And I'm currently working on the transfer of one that services an ultra high net worth individual based in Europe. So having incorporated an exempted company to be the vehicle through which the family office is created, I'm in the process of submitting these applications for several directors who themselves will shortly relocate in order to conduct the day-to-day management and establish the hub of the family office from within Cayman.
Right.
Finally, with this option, it's interesting to note that actually this does lead to some form of permanent residence because of the associated work permit requirement. It does place the holder on the regular path that all expatriates are on to permanent residency, which means that after a period of 8 years, depending on meeting certain other criteria under a point system, it's possible to apply for permanent residence. There is a fourth option. I won't go into too much detail about it because it's certainly not popular at all. It requires a minimum investment of $1 million in a local business, a licensed employment generating business, it's called, which essentially means a business that employs a minimum of 30% Caymanians. But there's no ability to progress citizenship, and due to our local licensing laws, there's no ability to own or control a majority of the business.
Okay, so not very popular at all, that one. Which one is the most popular from your perspective? And have you seen increased popularity or shifts in that?
Yeah, certainly going back to the first option, I would say the certificate of permanent residence, the one that requires the $2 million real estate investment, is definitely the most popular. When I first came here about a decade ago, it was mainly a case of sort of, as I said, those retirees looking for somewhere idyllic to reside and live out their days. And they were more interested in the 25-year residency certificate. They weren't too bothered about citizenship or about seeking employment or setting up businesses in the islands. Now what we're seeing is there's a real trend of families moving here, parents wishing to pass on these benefits to their children eventually, and the citizenship route is the way for them to do that. And that's when other things come into play, of course, such as the sort of estate planning and setting up structures to complement these investments.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I want to go back to Sue, and this, what Daniel's just sort of, concluded with, moves us on nicely to my next question, which is, I'm going to tie my question with a question that somebody has put in from Asia, from China, actually. You've got option one, which is essentially it's a passive investment, isn't it? Really, you buy the property. You're not involved in any kind of business. You're not employing any local people, and generally those tend to be quite popular around the world. Can you give us a sense, Sue, please, of what property prices are like in Cayman for condos and luxury homes, because you're representing Cristin, but you have a number of your own developments, and then secondly, what's the cost of living? Because I hear families, and you both have families, and you've got children at school. What is the cost of living for families in comparison to the United States and to China? Let's focus on those two jurisdictions. But the first part of my question is, what are property prices like in Cayman, please?
Certainly, and to start, property prices here, like anywhere else, will vary depending on where you live. But in terms of what I would call the most popular corridor, where most people desire to live when they first come here, is what's called the 7 Mile Beach corridor. And that's the area that is where most of our higher priced real estate is located. And in that market area, you will find beachfront condos and beautiful private homes and villas, largely located on canals that will be no more than, a 5-minute walk or a very short drive away to the beach. And houses in that market area will typically start around $1 million US. If you are buying a condo on the beach, you will be looking, for the most part, at a minimum of $1,000 US per square foot. If you move further out into the west or east end of the island, of Grand Cayman, you can certainly find a property more affordable. It's very easy to get a lovely home in a very natural environment, again, not far from the coast, and perhaps a 25-30 minute drive into Georgetown, which is our capital city, for approximately $500,000. Essentially, everything is available here for every budget. As Daniel noted, however, though, if you are on that pathway to residency and eventually citizenship, you will need to meet a minimum requirement of investing either US 1.2 million or 2.4 million. And for that reason, most people tend to look in the 7 Mile Beach area. The other thing to note is that you do not have to buy just one property. So you could, for instance, in theory, buy 2 properties, one for $600,000 that you live in, and then perhaps another one for $600,000 that you might use for a rental property. I know when people look at residency and citizenship programs in the Caribbean, they often ask, do you have to buy in a pre-approved residential development in Cayman? And the answer is no. So unlike some of the citizenship by investment programs that you will see in other Caribbean countries, you do not have to come here and buy from a pre-approved developer or in a pre-approved project. And basically, and as long as you meet the criteria of buying a property that is developed real estate and the minimum financial criteria, as Daniel has described, then you can use that real estate investment to qualify for residency. In terms of answering the second part of your question, cost of living, Cayman does have a reputation for having.
Sorry, can I just add quickly on the first part before you move on, just so people are aware, it is possible to obtain financing for the purchase of any of those properties from one of our local or internationally recognised banks for the purposes of applying for residency. So it doesn't have to be 100% equity investment. It's absolutely possible to leverage the investment. And similarly, there's lots of other ways that the government's flexible and accommodating in its approach, but other ways of, for example, the registration of the property can be in the holder's name, it can be in the holder and spouse's name, it can be in the name of a company for asset protection reasons, which is obviously a popular route if you're looking to rent it out on a long-term or short-term basis, or for those who wish to settle the shares of that company into a trust, so often sort of looking at the succession planning purposes.
Thank you, Daniel. And yes, to note on that as well, as we do have a number of international buyers right now who have asked precisely that question. Can you get financing locally? And that's something that's usually a pleasant surprise for them to find out that we have a number of Class A banks that do offer the financing. And certainly I think now, when people are more concerned than ever before to be in a liquid position and also wanting to take advantage of these historic low interest rates, that bank financing is becoming an increasingly important topic. And we have some great Class A commercial banks here, 3 ones that are well known from Canada, Scotiabank, RBC, and CIBC, as well as 2 Cayman banks, Butterfield and Cayman National, all of whom are actively involved right now in lending. And much like the conveyancing of property and our financial services business continuity plans, lending continues even during this environment. So thank you, Daniel, for prompting on that one.
What about the cost of living for families? What's that like?
Yeah, so Cayman, I think, has an undeserved reputation for being an expensive place to live. So certainly when you come here, it does on the surface seem more expensive because, you're usually bringing dollars in from another jurisdiction. And, the Cayman dollar here is permanently pegged at $1.20. But again, please keep in mind for those of you who might look at some of our prices is that you're no longer paying tax here. And I can still remember the joy of, cashing my first paycheck and having it all. I mean, it's really an exhilarating experience not to see all of those deductions at the bottom of your pay stub. So, when you take into consideration the fact that there's no tax and you don't have all of the expenses of things that you have in urban centers. For instance, we don't have parking meters here. And well, we do at the airport, but with the exception of that, for the most part, you don't pay for parking. I don't pay for snow tires anymore. There's so many expenses that when you're moving from colder climates or urban centers, you forget about until you live here. In terms of some key indicators that I know people look for, one is education. Education here, again, is very reasonable, at least compared to the fees I've paid in Canada and the US. So at a private school, which is where if you're an expat, you will send your children if you live here, you're going to be looking at tuition in the range of $10,000 to $20,000 US per child per year, depending on the school that you're going to and the age of your child. And I think as with any other school system, as your child gets older, so too do your tuition fees increase. Yeah, healthcare here is mandatory to have healthcare insurance. Employers pay 50% of the healthcare for employees, and then the employee must match it, although many employers will also pay the employee's share of that health insurance. So for instance, if you go to the doctor for a routine checkup and it's not covered by your annual wellness benefit, typically you're going to pay maybe $40 to go for a routine doctor's appointment. So, healthcare again is very competitively priced. We have 4 hospitals in Cayman, 3 on Grand Cayman, and a rapidly growing medical tourism industry here, in large part because of the high quality of our facilities. And I think it's important to note, coming from a jurisdiction such as I have from Canada, the wait time here is practically non-existent. So again, I remember when I first moved here calling my doctor and saying, could I get an appointment? And they apologized that they could not get me in until the next day. So those are some of the great parts about living here is having that both affordable healthcare as well as effective healthcare. Utilities tend to be higher than you'll get on the mainland, so you're going to be looking somewhere around 30 cents per kilowatt hour. Gas is certainly more expensive per liter, but on the flip side, you don't drive very far. Our island is 22 miles long. So again, everything is relative. And once you are here, if you're working here, you will earn Cayman dollars, again, which are tax-free. And otherwise, it really comes down to how you choose your life, to live your life here in terms of expense.
All right. Okay. Look, there's many reasons for choosing the Cayman. I'd like to put this to the audience actually and launch another poll right now and ask the audience what they think the #1 reason is why people would choose to apply for residency through investment in the Cayman Islands. And as ever, we'll publish at about, well, at 85%. Okay, we're coming at 65, 70% have voted, 78%, 83, 80, okay, here we go, let's have a look. And I think probably maybe not anything surprising there. Any comments, Daniel, as a lawyer?
Well, I mean, absolutely, and obviously we've talked about the tax neutrality of Cayman being a real attraction for a lot of our clients, and it goes. I mean, even for clients from the US who are obviously taxed on their worldwide income, taking up residency in Cayman is still a way for them to reduce their tax liability when it comes to things like high state taxes, sales tax, in some states even death taxes. But you look at, I mean, obviously, in London, the Office of Budget Responsibility is predicting a deficit of £280 billion for this financial year, although Financial Times is predicting it to be even higher. I was speaking to a friend who's a tax lawyer at a leading firm in London, and the obvious question is how are governments around the world going to pay for all of this? No one's suggesting that they're going to attempt to clear all of their deficit from taxes, but it can be reasonably assumed that individuals will bear the brunt of those potential changes. And so, which individuals will be targeted, in my view, it will be the wealthy ones. And then, you look at a country like Canada, for example, and Sue can speak much more to this, much more readily than I can, but, there's not much left to increase. You look at capital gains tax and income tax, you think it surely can't go any higher. And so where does that leave us but with a wealth tax? And then you look at a place like Cayman, we don't have any of those taxes and certainly no wealth and none on effort. So, from conversations we're having with clients, there are lots of nervous individuals around the world, especially those that I'm speaking to in the EU. They're starting to think about their next move. There's a lot of uncertainty in their home countries, too much debt being accumulated. It's driving them further afield, to economically stable countries like Japan.
Okay, all right, good. I'm going to close that off and move again to a few more questions that we've had coming in before we go to any final thoughts. We have a question from Cristin Surak, and I think this is probably for you, Daniel. How do estate planning and succession tie into the residence and citizenship options? And secondly, how much time is required to spend in the country?
Well, I mean, I'll answer the second part first, which is how much time. The certificates vary between 1 and 90 days per annum. So it depends which one you're on. If you're on the permanent residence certificate, it's 1 day. If you're on the 25-year certificate by way of a real estate investment, it's 30 days. And if you're on either of the other two, sort of focus more on the businesses and family offices, it's 90 days. But the 1 day requirement doesn't apply if you're then looking to progress to citizenship, because you need to satisfy the residence requirements for the naturalization process, which is in that first 5-year period. You need to be, broadly speaking, resident for 9 months a year, because what it requires you to do is to apply saying, I've not been absent for more than 450 days in that 5-year period, and no more than 90 days in my final 12 months. There are exceptions, and lots of clients have applied, and it's a discretionary process, as you know. So, provided you can come up with reasons such as health or education or business travel, it's possible that those requirements aren't strictly met. But that 5-year period is key in the sense of progressing towards citizenship.
Okay, Sue, a question for you. You talked about.
Did you want me to talk about the estate planning aspect as well, just briefly?
Very, very briefly, though, less than a minute. And I know that's tough because it is a complex question to answer. But if you can stick to yes, no, maybe, something like that.
Well, Yes, and sort of coming back to what I was talking about, setting up the investment in companies or shares that are settled into trust. Also, the idea of progressing citizenship once you're Caymanian. So if you're looking at an 11-year process, once you hit that point, there's no then corresponding financial requirement. And so whilst the other certificates require you to maintain the investment for the duration of the certificate at that level, once you become Caymanian, you would be free to sell, transfer that real estate out of your name, let's say to children, put it into children's names. So, that's appealing on the estate planning side. There's sort of an 11-year plan whereby you can then dispose of the property or your investments, in that manner.
Okay, thank you. Sue, question for you. Can you mention the fifth advantage again that you talked about? And it's the one I didn't write down. It was infrastructure, right?
Lifestyle. So I talked about efficiency, the low density here, proximity to the United States, our infrastructure, in which I talked about how both our healthcare and education, and utilities and telecoms. And then the fifth just was our wonderful lifestyle, culinary, diving, great weather. Okay,
and then another question for you, Sue. You talked about Cayman being a tax-free domicile. Excuse me. The same goes for Dubai. Why do you think, or how do you think Cayman is better than Dubai in this respect?
Well, I don't think we're better. I just think we're different. So, I think a lot of it comes down to what is the preference for where people are looking. A lot of it is geographic location. For a number of the people that are relocating here, they want to be proximate to the United States and Canada. They want to be in a lower density locale. So I think that's important. For others, it's language. It's for those that are English speaking, obviously Cayman will have appeal. There's definitely the benefit of being in a British overseas territory. And, for many people that move here, that's very important, knowing that they are in a small nation that still has, security, oversight from the UK, as well as the fact our highest court of appeal is the British Privy Council. So that's important. I think a lot of it comes down to culture and the type of lifestyle that you want. A lot of people come here precisely because of that laid back island lifestyle. And again, coming back to that Cayman kind culture that I talked about, it certainly has a lot of appeal for individuals. We have not spent time in Dubai, so I really can't compare the two. I will tell you though, on the tax topic, people often ask us, if the government does not charge tax, how do they generate their income? And I think that's becoming an important consideration and a question that individuals looking to relocate here should be interested in, because ultimately that tax neutrality has to have a solid foundation on which to continue to be a benefit moving forward. And the great thing is, due to the way the government generates its revenue here, the way companies such as ours invest, we've invested $1.5 billion US in the economy to date. Last year, we announced intentions to invest a similar amount going forward. Our company is not alone in making those significant investments here. So I think it comes down to, when you look at tax neutral jurisdictions, to really understand how the government generates its income and what other type of industry is there, and what is that industry's long-term commitment to the future sustainability and economic viability of the jurisdiction. So those would be some of the key things I would say differentiate us.
All right, interesting. So there's quite a lot actually that differentiates you, and I can understand that. Moving on, we have another question from Alexander Swarovski, who is an IMC member, and he asked, through the first route, Daniel, option 1, which is the certificate of permanent residence for persons of independent means, annual physical presence requirements in the first 5 years are what to qualify for citizenship. Now, you must be physically resident for at least 1 day per annum So 1 times 5 is 5 days. Does that calculation make sense?
No, it's confusing, but that on the face of it, if all you want to be is a permanent resident, then yes, absolutely, 1 day a year. You'll very much enjoy your 1 day, as we tell our clients. But no, if you're looking to progress
for citizenship,
if you're looking to progress citizenship, then it's a more strenuous requirement in the sense that you can't be absent for more than 450 days in that 5-year period. Now, it doesn't necessarily have to be the first 5 years, usually it is, but at whatever point during that permanent residency you decide, okay, I now want to progress to citizenship, you now have to start looking at a 5-year period during which you'll satisfy that. So it could be that, look, the first year or two, you weren't here very much. But after the 2nd year, you decide, look, I'd like to progress citizenship. So then you're looking at the 5-year period thereafter.
Okay. And then finally, is there any VAT or sales tax in Cayman?
No, which is lovely.
Okay, good. We have run out of time, although we still have our audience with us. I'm conscious that we start and finish on time. Any final thoughts, please, from Sue and then from Daniel?
Yeah, I'll just start by saying I think we've covered a lot of ground on the call this morning, and hopefully the message that we've shared of just how safe and Cayman is, how simple it is to establish residency here and do business here. And despite the fact that, a relatively small Caribbean nation, how sophisticated we are in terms of our infrastructure, our regulatory environment, and our lifestyle, will be appealing to those individuals who are looking to preserve their wealth and have options available for enhanced global mobility going forward in the future. Our company is dedicated, as I mentioned, to continued investment in Cayman. Yes, we are a real estate company, but we also have many other facets in our portfolio. And we are very committed to helping individuals such as those who have joined the call today or their advisors to helping learn more about Cayman and its value proposition. And we do hope when our borders open back up on September 1st, that we will have the pleasure of welcoming you to Cayman to meet with Daniel and I in person, come have a cold beverage at a beach bar and see our lifestyle in person and find a little bit more about what really makes this one of the best places in the world to live.
Fantastic. Thank you, Sue. Daniel, last thoughts?
No, I just echo all of that. And, of course, we look forward to welcoming you all, hopefully sooner rather than later. We're told that yesterday that we may only be a couple of weeks away from all restrictions being lifted. So, there's hope that the airport might reopen sooner rather than later. And, of course, all of you are finding that, and certainly the inquiries that we're receiving at the moment is, this idea that we've all learned that living in a busy city, we now are able to look elsewhere, and we're able to utilize all those wonderful technologies like Zoom and DocuSign that a few months ago we didn't really know much, if anything, about. And high net worth are realizing they can remain just as connected with their businesses and advisors and family offices from anywhere. And so, sort of coming back to what Sue said, we're on the same time zone as the East Coast, and obviously for lots of high net worth individuals in this part of the world, Cayman is proving to be an even more attractive option in this new post-COVID world.
Thank you very much, Daniel. And thank you very much to our audience for joining us. I hope you enjoyed and found today's session interesting. You have some interesting information about what the Cayman Islands is, the various residency options, the lifestyle. Very unfortunately, we couldn't see Sue, and thus she couldn't show us the beautiful view that she has from her office window. I hope that we'll be able to do that soon. If you're not already a member of the IMC, then please visit our website for more information on joining and supporting the work that we do. We also post a lot of daily updates on what's happening in the industry right now. We'll be back next Wednesday, that's the 24th of June, same time, that's 2:30 Central European Summer Time, and we'll be discussing a Mediterranean Greek Golden Visa Program with the various investment options, the requirements, and our guest speaker will be Alexander Varnavas, another IMC member who's a residency by investment attorney based in Athens in beautiful Greece. So until then, stay safe. Thank you very much once again for joining us. Thank you to Daniel and to Sue for sharing part of their morning with us and part of their deep knowledge of the beautiful Cayman Islands. If you do wish to reach out to them, they are on LinkedIn. There is some information in the GoToWebinar widget on the right of your screen about relocating to Cayman, so download that. Or get in touch with me at the IMC and we'll happily pass on your emails. So until next Wednesday, thank you very much once again, and I'll leave you with a short video about the Investment Migration Council's certification in investment migration.
Introducing the Certification in Investment Migration from the Investment Migration Council, the first structured learning product of its kind globally, designed for you. Explore the bite-sized learning pathway of each module on our custom online platform. You can track your progress as you go and learn at a pace that suits you, with an estimated 5 hours of study time per module. The Certification in Investment Migration contributes to the development of professional competencies and standards for those new to or already working in the industry. So, what are you waiting for? Visit our website to start your learning journey today.